We women are our own worst enemy because we think we have to have it all together. You get better by doing, not by sitting at home and planning and writing and thinking about it. Just start.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Chill Mom Boss Show, and I'm your host, Michelle Han, and I'm very glad that you're tuning in today. The world that we live in today is very different from what we were living just 2-3 months ago. And if you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, a bit fearful of what the future may bring, today's guest, Margie Warrell, would be the perfect person to walk you through this journey. And she is the founder of Global Courage, and she's an author of 5 books. She has a brand new book coming out called You've Got This, and I want you to hear from her. Welcome, Margie. Thank you so much for being on this show.
Michelle, it's great to be joining you.
So why don't you tell my audience who you are? I've seen your bio and all the photos you have with all the famous people like Sir Richard Branson, Tony Robbins, and Ariana Huntington. So tell me about your journey.
Yeah, well, it's been a very interesting one. I grew up actually on a small dairy farm in rural Australia, one of 7 kids. Never left the country till I was 19. Hadn't gotten a plane till I was 19. So I had a very pretty confined childhood growing up. My father milked cows for 50 years. But over the last 25 years, I've lived and worked around the world and had opportunities to work with extraordinary people like Tony Robbins, like Richard Branson, Bill Marriott, lots of different people and leaders and luminaries, really pursuing my own passion, my own sense of purpose and calling in the world, and helping others to get out of their own way and keep the fear that so often hems us in check. And obviously right now we're in the midst of an extraordinary time where we are dealing with so much uncertainty, and many people are finding themselves feeling anxious and feeling afraid of what does the future hold, what's the new norm going to look like when we are able to come back out of our homes and back into our lives. And so, it just so happens that my new book, You've Got This, has come out right in the midst of this pandemic. So no irony lost on me that just as I'm launching a book telling people you've got this, trust yourself, you can handle more than you think, you can do more than you think, I have had to really walk my own talk myself in the last month or so.
Yeah, so and you are residing in Singapore right now?
I am, yes, I am in Singapore right now.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit, and I always like to find out who the person is before she is who she is today. And so growing up in a farm in rural Australia, did you think, what was your ambition as a child? Did you think this is what you would be doing?
No, I couldn't have, because I didn't even know about it. Yeah. So I grew up, my mum looked after the kids, my dad milked cows, no one had gone to university. I went to the city once a year where I saw traffic lights, and the most exciting thing was going to McDonald's once a year. So we never went to a restaurant my entire childhood. We went once to a restaurant. So I'd been to a restaurant once before the age of 18.
Wow.
So nothing like a Singaporean existence where we eat out all the time. And so, no, I couldn't have imagined it. I never even occurred to me to write books. I didn't know there were people who would travel around the world on stages and speaking. So absolutely, the life I'm living is not one that I imagined as a child. Yeah. As a teenager, I was really interested in being a journalist, a television journalist. I was quite captivated with the idea of being like a foreign correspondent, but I recall my mum saying to me when I shared that with her, saying, but you don't read the paper and you don't know what's going on in the news. And it was true, but we didn't get the paper and we didn't talk about what was going on in the news. So it was probably pretty hard as a 14, 15-year-old to have been particularly worldly or up on global politics. But certainly once I moved to Melbourne to go to university as an 18-year-old, and then when I finished there, I spent a couple of years backpacking around the world, and that really opened up the world to me a lot and helped me see a whole lot of, expanded my horizons of what was possible. And, I didn't mention that I have 4 children as well. So I have 4 wonderful children. I guess that's how we connected to, the theme, obviously, mum boss. So for me, it's been continually pushing my own boundaries of what's possible and having the courage to put myself out there and be uncomfortable. And I think it's that unwillingness to be uncomfortable that holds us back.
Okay, so tell me about, your journey first time as a 19-year-old in Melbourne. And then how did you, from that girl, to become a leader in an authority in leadership and courage?
It wasn't a straight line, was definitely not linear. It has unfolded and has taken on lots of different twists and turns. So as a 19-year-old in Melbourne, I was unsophisticated, had bad acne, was dealing with an eating disorder, and no one knew that, of course. I knew that, but no one else knew that. And I would say I was pretty insecure, but I have always been, had a sense of adventure. I've always been curious. So on the outside, anyone looking at me would have always said, oh, no, you look like you've got it all together. On the inside, I knew that I didn't have it all together, even dealing with, I had bulimia. And I would never have told anyone that as a 19-year-old because I had a lot of shame around that. And so that's who I was as an 18, 19-year-old, just really exploring. I was always willing to work really hard, right the way through university. I worked 2 jobs. I always worked super hard. I never sat around watching TV for hours on end. I was always working hard just to pay the bills at that point in my life. In my 20s, as I got out and traveled more, I started realizing even backpacking around the world for a year on just a few travelers' checks. My parents didn't have any money, so it was very much self-funded. I think that helped build my resilience, and it also helped build my confidence. It's like, I can do this. I can travel in these strange places and figure my way through the public transport system or whatever it was. This is the days before internet. And I think that all of that built up my self-confidence and my self-reliance. And then I was back in Australia, met my husband. We've been married 26 and a half years. Long time. I should tell you I was married at 12. That's obviously not quite true. We got married and then actually we both wanted to say, let's go and work overseas. And we would love to have moved to Singapore at that point, but the only option we had was Papua New Guinea.
Oh, wow.
So we moved to Papua New Guinea as a young married couple. And that was an adventure because it's, at the time, I think it was one of the most dangerous countries in the world outside a war zone. And that itself was interesting. But again, it sort of just gave you're continually broadening your experience of life and how you're looking at things. And it was while I was there, a series of experiences. I was in an armed robbery. I had a miscarriage at 4.5 months pregnant. Then I had 2 more miscarriages. But that's when I decided I'd studied business, but I went back to university and studied psychology, thinking I really want to become someone who helps people deal with their own thinking, what gets in our own way, the barriers in our own heads. And I went back there and did psychology, which then I moved back to Melbourne, then I moved to Adelaide, Australia, then I moved to Dallas, Texas. And all that while having children, then I had 4 children in 5 years. Wow. In between having 4 children, as I said, I've always worked hard, so I would study for a few hours here and there, start with my psychology degree, and eventually trained as a coach living in America. And while in the United States, started a coaching business and started speaking in the United States to try and get coaching clients. But then speaking took on a whole world of its own, and I ended up running leadership programs for NASA and for the United Nations Foundation, and it all just came about simply, honestly, it was, nothing to do with my network. I mean, it was people I met, but it wasn't like I got given a network. I had to make a network. And even moving to Singapore 2.5 years ago, I landed here. I didn't know anyone in Singapore. It's the third continent I've had to start my business on, a third time over. And so just going out and meeting people and making connections, and someone introduces you to someone, and then you have a coffee, and it all over time, there's a ripple effect. But just showing up and putting myself out there, if I was going to say anything, putting myself out there again and again and again, and not just sticking with what was comfortable.
Wow, because you're really living the example of being courageous and just go out there, and because you restarted your life many times over. And when you first started off as a coach in the US, what were you coaching, and how did that lead to all the speaking engagement in like NASA, and those are big names.
Yeah. So I didn't know anyone in it. I was a mum at home with 4 kids.
And you were balancing all this, doing psychology, coaching.
I had 4 little kids, and actually with the first 3 children, I had no help. So I definitely just did it all on my own. But when we decided to have a 4th child, my husband said, why don't we get some help? And I mean, in Singapore, obviously, it's just common to have help. But I hadn't grown up with help. Help was expensive, and I didn't feel that we were in a position to afford it. And then with the 4th child, we decided to get an au pair. We got an 18-year-old from Australia, came and lived with us. And that allowed me to do more, to have that help. And that was something I had to get out of my own way, because I was like, I thought I had to do it all on my own. And getting that help, really, that made a big difference. And so the speaking, actually, I started speaking to try and get coaching clients. I would go and give free talks everywhere. Anywhere that wanted someone to do a free, I would reach out to all the sorts of associations and say, can I give a free talk? And I gave a lot of free talks before I gave a paid talk. And as people saw me speak, eventually someone from actually Accenture, a bigger consulting firm, said, could you come and give a talk at our company? And then someone at Accenture that was there was from HR, and they said, well, could you coach some of these executives that we have? And so it all I started doing more and more in the corporate realm.
Organically, and especially back in those days, there's no social media. So it's really just human connection, networking.
100%. There was never a brochure I had a website. I mean, obviously I still have a website, but it wasn't. It was everyone. Came down to either someone meeting me or seeing me speak, or someone who had seen me or met me recommending me. I mean, that was 100% of it. It wasn't someone finding me online. Nowadays, obviously, people find me online because I write for Forbes, or they find me on YouTube, or, just because of the content. But, I mean, the internet, I had a website, but there was no social media when I started in 2003. Well, if there was, I wasn't on social media. I don't think there was no Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn back in 2003. So it was really just people seeing me in person. It was all organic. And while I have a lot of people say to me, how do I get to where you are? Well, I've been doing this now for, how old's Matthew? My youngest, 16 years.
Yeah.
My youngest child's 17 years old, and I started doing it when the year he was born in 2003. I gave my first talk. It probably took a few months till I got my first client in 2004. So that's 16 years ago. And of course, in the beginning, I wasn't making a lot of money. I need to be clear here. It's not like I came out the gates and I was making a 6-figure salary. The first year or two, I don't know if I made a 5-figure salary. I was just getting my wheels on, just kind of getting out there. Yeah. And then it sort of built up. But I think there were a few pivot points that really took it to another level. And writing my first book, I self-published it. But then I sent it out to all the big publishing houses. And one of them said, we really like this book. We want to republish this globally. And then that allowed me, I had hired a publicist. I ended up on the Today Show in Rockefeller Plaza in New York. Nice. And then I ended up on the CNN. And obviously then I did a lot of media on CNN and Fox and CNBC and all of the big So I started doing a lot more media, which then that took things to another level. And as I got better at speaking, I'd get invited to speak at bigger and bigger events. And so I have just worked hard doing what I love to do. And some things have worked well and some things haven't. And I don't think there's one formula. And I would say you couldn't, to try and copy everything I do might not land the same results. But I always say to people, do more of what it is you want to do well. Be as excellent as you can. Put yourself out there. Connect with people. Be smart. Take the feedback when you don't get the results you want. Look at what is it I'm not doing so well. I think sometimes I see people making the mistake thinking, oh, if I'm just passionate, that's enough. Well, I think you absolutely have to be passionate, but you also need to take the feedback and go, well, where do I need to position myself differently? Or how am I not promoting myself in a way that's connecting to the audience or that demonstrates the value I have to bring? So it's being smart about it as well.
So you've been working by yourself, building this business up as, juggling studies, coaching, trying to get speaking opportunity to get your name out there, parenting, mothering. So, and then you are constantly getting feedback as well. So where do you go and get these feedback? And do you have a mentor, or do you learn it off someone? Or what is that?
I've had a whole lot of different, I'm kind of, it's funny, I'm looking at myself now and I'm going, oh, I should have done my hair. And
you look great. This is how moms look like. Well, I did get to
home days, most days right now.
Yes, exactly.
I've had coaches over the years, absolutely. I haven't had them consistently, but I've had them in different intervals. I have connected with people who I've made good friendships with, who have I have actively asked for feedback. What do you think I could do differently? What do you think I could do more of? Giving people permission to be really candid with me. And that's really important, that people feel they can be truthful, because if you ask most people, what do you think? And they'll go, oh, you're great.
Yeah, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So, okay, maybe
I think it's really important to say to someone, I would like you to give me 2 things you think I could do better, or 1 thing you think I could do more of, and 1 thing you think maybe I could do less of. And give them permission to be truthful with you, because most people will only say what they think you want to hear. And most people will be too afraid to say, actually, like for instance, there's a woman I know here in Singapore who has a business, and she is a coach, and she would like to speak more, and she would like to have a book. And she said, how can I get further along to where you are? And I said, well, the name of your business, to be truthful with you, I think the name of your business really holds you back. She said, really? And I said, yeah, I just think your business sounds fluffy. And doesn't have substance to it. And I know that was hard for her to hear, because she really loves the name of her business that she came up with 15 years ago. But I said, it's just extremely feminine. It sounds really fluffy, and it doesn't sound like you have a lot of substance to bring. And your business name is this fluffy sort of, makes me think of someone who is very esoterical and it's all very woo-woo versus based in some good evidence-backed science and research, what you talk about. And so she sat with that and recently said to me, you told me that about a year ago, Margie. I sat with it a long time, and I finally have taken and I've changed my business name. Yay. And I said, great. And I knew I was being kind of hard, like what I was saying was hard for her to hear, but I was like, I just think your business name's totally holding you back. And you came up with that business name at a time 15 years ago, and it felt good. But just because that was the business name you created 15 years ago doesn't mean it's the business name that's going to take you to the next level. Or even the pretty little logo you have that doesn't connect with the audience that you're trying to market to. So I've also welcomed that feedback myself at times too, with people just saying, in different formats, you should invest more money here. You should, do less of this over here. It's wasting your time. But that said, I also, actually in my book, Brave, which is my 3rd book, I have a chapter in there, and it's advice I give to a lot of people. Seek expert advice, but apply sparingly. because the worst advice you ever get is bad advice. And I see people, and I think it's a mistake I made, was at the beginning when you don't know, I had everyone tell me you need to just find a niche. Find your niche, which I understand there's a logic to it. But Margie, you should be the coach for expatriate women. Because you're an expatriate woman. This is when I was living in Dallas, Texas. Or expatriate women with young children. And I was like, the thought that they're the only people that I would coach or work with bores me, just bores me.
Yeah.
Like that bores me so much. That's not to say that wouldn't be good advice for someone else. It just didn't
wasn't right for you. Yeah.
I've also had advice saying you should always wear red. Everywhere you go, wear red. That's your color. Now, I love red, and I wear red a lot. And I wear a lot on television. I wear it a lot on stage. But I don't want to always wear red. I just don't want to always wear red. So sometimes some people are like, well, no, that's your brand color. You need to always wear that if you're ever doing anything. And as you can see today, I'm in a summery dress, which is not looking overly professional, but it's comfortable, and that's what I'm working in today. So
yeah, why not? And most of our audience are working from home, moms just like you and just like us. So yeah.
Well, and I think a key thing is, and I would say this to a lot of people, be yourself. And I think in my 30s, and I'm guessing a lot of your audience are in their 30s, and I'm not anymore. I think sometimes we're trying to prove something, and we've got on our polished veneer, this is who I am, and we can be all very glammed up, and it's easy to get caught up in looking good and wanting to look perfect and have the design of this and the design of that and the perfect image. And I saw she was advertising professional portraits recently in Singapore, and I looked at them, and none of them appealed to me because they were all so not real. just kind of fake. I mean, just sort of that, and I'm like, no one walks around looking like be yourself. We want to know who the person is behind. We want to know who you are. Yeah. We don't want to know that you look like everybody else. And I think that's important. I would say to people, stop trying to be like someone else. Stop trying to look like someone out of, Crazy Rich Asians or something else. Just be yourself and have your own brand, and let that'll develop over time.
Yeah.
And that for me is not trying to prove, I'm not trying to be like anybody else. As I've got better at being myself. I remember when I was asked to interview Richard Branson. I went and had a few days with him at his island, and I was asked to interview him for Forbes. And as I was thinking about, obviously he's a pretty iconic guy, and the day before I interviewed him, I met him, and he was really warm and friendly, and I just thought, I could get all caught up like, oh, I'm interviewing Richard Branson, I should look like I'm polished and look $1 million. And we were hanging on his island. I literally was in a dress a bit like this and in bare feet the night that I ended up interviewing him, because that was the environment. Just sort of, maybe I had some thongs, flip-flops on, but it was... And it was sort of like, no, he's a relaxed guy. He is very at home with himself.
Yeah.
Who am I when I'm at home with myself? I am not going to have my hair all coiffed and be in expensive jewelry. It's going to be just in my $25 necklace and then my little pair of studs, that's and you know what? And the feet, and I know we really got on really well. He was great. But I know that connection was much more authentic because I wasn't trying to be someone, if you know what I'm saying. So I would just say to people, stop trying to be somebody other than who you are. And I think there's just a massive power in authenticity, and that's, I know, opened a lot of doors for me, because versus trying to be someone, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think it's a lot easier to just be yourself than trying to be someone else, because you would never be as good as the someone else that you're trying to be.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring it back to today, and as we are all in this situation, and how do you think your book is something that would help moms, especially in this situation and what we're going through?
Chapter 1, here it is here, right? Chapter 1 is don't wait for confidence. And I share in there my own story, but I also share the story of a woman. I started running Live Brave weekends, women's weekends, about 5 years ago. I ran my first one just on Batam Island exactly a year ago, here in Singapore. But one of the women who came to my very first one, she had this idea for a business, but she was just completely paralyzed because she was like, I don't know how to launch my own activewear line. But she really wanted to, for larger size women. She's larger size, and she wanted to be colorful. And she came to the weekend and she realized she put all of her energy and all of the reasons why not, why she wasn't skilled enough, why she wasn't knowledgeable enough. And as I say in chapter 1, don't wait for confidence. Do not wait until you know what you're doing. Do not wait until you have a perfect business plan. Do not wait until you have mastered the craft, whatever craft you have. If I'd waited till I was the perfect coach or the perfect speaker or the world's best writer, I wouldn't have started a coaching business. I'd never have got up to speak. I would never have written a book. And I think there's so much power in lowering your perfectionist bar. And I think we women are our own worst enemy because we think we have to have it all together and know exactly what we're doing and look the part before we start. And you get better by doing, not by sitting at home and planning and writing and thinking about it, by just doing. So when people say, I'd like to write a book, I'm like, well, start by writing an article and publish it on LinkedIn or a blog, or just start. You don't have to write the world's best article. Just start. People say, I want to start a podcast. I'm like, you don't have to start the world's best podcast. Just start a podcast. And that's been a huge key for me. And juggling that with 4 kids, giving yourself permission to be an imperfect mother as well. I don't think, as I've said to my kids many times, you don't have to be a perfect mum to be a great mum. I have fallen down many times when it comes to being as organized as I'd like. I'm the opposite of a tiger mother. And I know in Asia, I am like so countercultural that I see people literally break out in hives listening to the way I have parented my kids, who are at Columbia and NYU, and I might say they're doing super well.
Awesome.
And because I have never once known what school projects they have had on, and probably not since they're about 10. I wouldn't know what projects they have. I don't even hardly know what exams they've got coming up. I'm just like, get to it, guys. This is on you. And they know if they're relying on mum to be on top of their work schedule, they will fail because I have no idea. I'm like, just let me know if I can support you. But hey, it's on you. And so that raises really self-reliant kids who are all just self-driven to do well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a very good advice, especially for moms in Singapore who are dealing with home-based learning. And for the first time ever, everyone is trying to do homeschooling, which is not very common in Singapore. And everyone is like, I have to sit next to my kid. And I'm like, why do you have to sit next to them? They know how to work that computer better than how you know how to work that computer these days. Right?
And honestly, lower the bar through a time like this. Seriously, lower the bar. I really believe that I actually think we do our kids a lot of damage by being over-parenting and being really anxious for them. I see that. I see the mental health issues of teenagers. It doesn't serve our kids. Our kids aren't happier because we're riding their backs all the time. And frankly, actually, we can do a lot of damage to our kids too. And I know myself, it's my interpersonal skills that have landed me everything. It's not because I ever got the best test scores. I didn't go to the best university. I did well enough. I did fine academically, but it wasn't because I have an Ivy League education. I mean, that wasn't an option anyway, because my family had no money. But it was my people skills, and likewise for my own kids. They're good kids. They've got fine scores. They're B+ kids. Occasionally they'll get A's and they get B+, and sometimes a C. And I'm like, do you know how to connect with people? Do people want to hang around with you? Can you organize things? Are you someone that people are going to like? And that's really important in the world. Are you creative? Can you think outside the box? I don't care if you don't get 100% on a math test. Seriously, that's how is that going to really make an impact down the track? Unless you want to be an engineer or unless that's something you really want to go into, and which my kids don't. But I just think we get so caught up on the test scores, and our kids can't help but think that their worthiness is measured by their test score. And our kids' worth is not measured by their test score, nor the job they do. And we do them a disservice when we relate to them through that lens.
Yeah. Wow. I would definitely just take that part and just put it on replay on my story or my social media. That's just pure gold for the Asian tiger moms. They just really need to hear this.
Well, and recognizing too, Michelle, that's about our ego.
Yes.
We want to tell people, oh, my child's at Harvard, my child's at Columbia, Princeton, blah, blah, blah. That's your ego there. That's not about your child. That's about you, because you don't want to say my child's at, I don't know, whatever you think of as a lesser option, because they're studying, I don't know, something that's not as prestigious, art. And I just think that's about you. We need to do our own inner work. And I think you cannot raise brave, resilient, happy, grounded kids if you are hung up on everyone thinking that your child is the best, that they were the summa cum laude of their grade or whatever I think that's our ego and our fear of being judged that's running the show.
And I think, that's just, I fully agree with you. I think it's hard for Asian parents, like, my parents, for example, when I grew up, they have really high expectations of me. That's just, a lot of people think that's the way out of their current circumstances, or, whichever class that they're in, that studies and getting good results is the way out. But again and again, like, based on your stories, my story, or other people's story, it's really just a sheer hard work and building that confidence in us that willing to take risks, to have courage. That's why what you're doing is so important.
Oh, it's totally mindset, right? I mean, I did a business degree at a place that doesn't exist anymore. I did my business degree, but it's now part of Monash University in Australia. And it's fine. I did a business degree. I don't even know what I used from my business degree, right? But I learned confidence in my business degree. I learned the ability to talk to people and connect and not be intimidated by people. And I learned how to navigate a whole new world, a city world. I mean, I think of everything I learned from my 3-year degree, and very little of it was the actual knowledge from, I know I learned something, but that's not what I'm applying to.
Outside class, how you relate to other people.
It was so many things. And so now I'm not saying it. I mean, it's great. We need doctors and we need lawyers and we need engineers and we need data scientists and we need all of that thing. So I'm not in any way disparaging anything like that. All I'm saying is that it's about the reasons we do what we do. And I think when fear is running our parenting, or when fear is running us, then that actually is stifling us, because anywhere where your fear is calling the shots, you're not free, and your kids, frankly, are suffering.
So before we go, what's the one mindset that you want, our listener, our audience to take with them, or what's the one thing that they can do every time they feel a bit anxious, a bit like out of control, like I really don't know what's going to happen? And
well, I mean, the central premise, and I haven't really talked that much about what's in the book, because parenting is not what's in the book, like I obviously operate from that, but at the core of it is trusting in our innate capacity, our own internal ability and resources to deal with whatever's coming. And so often it's our fear of what we think might happen, and it's our fear of what we project onto what other people might think, or what we project into the future, that limits us. Whereas if you trusted in yourself that whatever happens you can handle it, that what anyone else says or thinks isn't what defines you, and even your circumstances don't define you, and where your kids go to college doesn't define you, or university doesn't define you. But actually when you're operating from a place of, I'm going to decide what I want to do, who I want to be, and I'm not going to give power to all of the externals outside of me, that allows you to hold yourself in your power, to operate from a really powerful and courageous place, and not to let fear sit in the driver's seat. And so to anyone that's listening, I would just ask yourself, how often do you let fear sit in the driver's seat? And if you were just going to ask yourself every day, if I was going to embrace the discomfort that courage requires, what would I do today? And, you know, I've spent a lot of time being a bit uncomfortable over the last, since I was 18, 30 years. And I would just say to anybody, just embrace a bit of discomfort, because that's how you grow. And everything you really want in your life, what you really want, not what your ego wants, but what you really want in your heart of hearts, will require you to embrace discomfort and be brave in some way, shape or form.
So I wake up in the morning, I feel not great. So just embrace it. Know that that is something that we have to deal with, and know that that's how we grow.
Well, ask yourself, why aren't you feeling great? And so my husband's just come out of 30 days with coronavirus, COVID. He got COVID-19.
Oh, okay.
He was in quarantine, so he's just arrived home after 30 days. And that was a difficult 30 days.
Yes.
And because we didn't know when he was eventually going to come home. He was quite sick for the first week. And I had a lot of emotions. There was a few days where I felt overwhelmed. I felt anxious. I was so much uncertainty. Our situation, I mean, we're not Singaporean citizens. We're not permanent residents. All of our situation, we have a massive uncertainty even where we're living in the future. And I've just had to allow myself to feel those feelings, and then just take a few big deep breaths. I've literally, and I share some techniques in the book of how we can actually process through the anxiety as it comes up, how we can work through those stressful emotions, that stress that we feel. And breathing, learning how to breathe mindfully is really central to that. And then connecting in with, who is it I want to be? I want to be optimistic about the future. I want to be resilient. I want to be calm for my children and family. I want to be brave. And then by grounding myself through the different strategies that I write about in the book, and there's a lot of different strategies that I use, that allows me to show up with calm, with optimism, with courage, and then to move through my day in that way. It doesn't mean that sometimes then I don't still go, what's going to happen? I'm like, no, and I'll ground myself again in that place. And you know what? It all is in here. And when we're in the right mindset to deal with our challenges, it changes everything.
Wow, I need to read that book. So tell us, where can we find the book?
Well, you can, all online booksellers will have it. If you want to get a hard copy, obviously Book Depository anywhere. You can download the ebook or the Audible book, the audio version. And there's links to most of them if you go to my website, which is margiewarrell.com.
We'll put it in the show link. /YGT for the book page, but margiewarrell.com. You can also download the manifesto for free if you'd like to do that. So that's at the book page. And I just invite people to connect with me also on social media, wherever we connect here. Awesome. Great. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've got tons of values from this, and I'm sure our audience get tons of values from this. And to know more about Margie, go to her website. We have it in our show link. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.